bank promise time goes from 1 to 3,000.
So, when you were
I'm using 3,800 fixed effects just with this variable.
when you were doing the weights on banks to see the number, so what's the purpose of that? That you were trying to isolate the banks that are not as big as the other ones, right?
You mean with the weights?
Yeah.
I go there. Give me 1 second. I go there. So these are the fixed effects, right? So what we're going to do in the regression is I define fixed effects at the front time level and I define fixed effects at the bank province time level. The two separate sets of fixed effects. So in this regression, you see that they are introduced separately. So I can introduce more fixed effects here. This is the advantage of this command. So it's bank time, turn time, space, first two set of fixed effects, bank province times, space, whatever I want, right? And then let's go to the things that appear. So this is the fixed effects. Okay. So second question, the clusters. So this is two-way cluster, right? So with the standard OLS regression, you can use one-way cluster. You mean what the cluster is? The cluster means how you are grouping the errors, the autocorrelation that you are seeing the errors to obtain properly the standard error. So what I mean is that if I don't use clusters for the standard errors, the beta, the coefficient that I get, is going to be the same. It doesn't change. What changes is the precision for the error that you estimate. And when you want to see which is the p-value or the t statistic, is the ratio between the coefficient and the standard error. If the standard error is not properly estimated, you can see that something is significant when it's not, or the opposite. And that's why it's very important when we use cluster to consider the autocorrelation in the errors. So we have cross-sectional autocorrelation and time series correlation. So what I'm saying here is that I'm using clusters at the bank level and province level. Two different types of clusters. What does it mean? It means that the credit supply of the bank is correlated. So the errors associated to that, they are going to be correlated in the sense that the banks are lending similarly across firms. So it's not independent the way in which a bank lends to a firm or to another firm. That's the idea, right? So they are correlated. And with the province as well, it's like you are generating clusters in order to see that the groups, in some sense, that are within the cluster are correlated. So the evolution of credit in a given province could be independent from the evolution of credit in another province, but within the province we have like some noise there, some common characteristics. And then we use the clusters in order to deal with this. Many people use another cluster. They use cluster at the time level. So it's fine using cluster at the time level when you have a very long time series. If you have 2 years or 2 periods, don't use cluster at the time level. Because the problem with the cluster, the basic rule is that the cluster is going to use the minimum number of groups that you have there. So suppose that I have banks, 200 banks, provinces, 40 provinces, or let's say 50, that probably some of them are not in this example that I use. Let's say the 50 provinces. The minimum of the two, that is the number of provinces, is what defines in some sense the size of the standard error. So if I add year and I have 3 years in the regression, what defines the magnitude of the standard error is going to be the minimum, that is the 3. And at least you need to have more than 30 individuals within the bucket that you are using standard errors with this cluster. Okay? So if you have, let's say, 2 banks, don't use cluster at the bank level. Okay? Because it's going to kill the significance of the coefficient. Okay? That's the idea with the clusters. But let me run this regression and I will show you what happens. Look, this is the regression that we run. So this here, is not found in the variable. Why is not? Probably this is at the front level. Well, let's say that this is the. I don't have the change, in the This is at the back level, okay? So I don't have that in the memory. I will use this one. It's the same idea. So I run this regression. This is not defined. This is defined. I don't care about the 5 10 kilometers. I'm redoing the regression because I don't have the whole sample. Let's see if it comes. I don't have the other variable. This is doesn't make sense. I think that sorry, I know what happens. I know what happens. Sorry. I was using the wrong data set because I have prepared several for it. So I can go back. Let's see. Yes. Perfect. So these are the fixed effects. You see, in the when it says absorb degrees of freedom, it means that you are using 27,000 fixed effects for the firm time. So it's like I'm using 27,000 variables that are dummies that take one for each firm GR combination. And I'm using 1,000 fixed effects for the combination of the bank, the province, and the time. Okay, that's the idea. So the first thing that I wanted to say, the clusters. Check this command. So here I'm using the clusters at the province bank level. You see the coefficient, no? It's 1.12. The standard error is 0.35. Suppose that I use the same command, but I don't consider the clusters. I get the same coefficient, but the standard error is different. So in this case, the clusters don't play an important role. You see 3.35, this is 3.5. Right? So if instead of that, let's say I use cluster at the province level, the command is going to be the same, but the standard error is different. So when you do this, you need to run. I mean, it's not that I have the magic formula to use clusters of this type or the other. So you have to play a little bit to see where the difference comes from. So if you see that the standard error changes a lot because considering a potential variable in the cluster, is because probably there is autocorrelation there. And then you have to think whether it makes sense to observe autocorrelation at that level or not. Okay? And then you can decide whether you use it or not. But what I mean is that it does not affect to the coefficient, the cluster. It affects to the other. Okay? So this is the question about the cluster, about the fixed effects.
It doesn't affect the coefficient, but the significance of the coefficient.
Exactly. So you see, for instance, the coefficient is always the same, 112, 49. The statistics, 305. Here, 112, 49. Here is 335.
It's more conservative than.
It depends on the cluster that you use. Usually, using more cluster is more conservative, but there are some cases in which it's the opposite if the autocorrelation that you are assuming at that level makes sense or not. Okay? The weights. How come we use weights in the regression? So to use weights, you can go to the help in Stata and you can write help weight. And that's what I wanted to show you this. There are multiple weights that can be used. One are the frequency weights, that it tells you the number of duplicated observations. So suppose that, I don't know, I have an experiment and I have the same person or the same company in this case, no? Because of trade that appears 10 times, because I have 10 trade relations. So one way is to deal with that. The other is this that takes into account the probability that an observation is included because of the sample design. So suppose that, for instance, in the household surveys, no? In the household survey, you cannot interview the almost 50 million of people in Spain. You have to interview a sample of 5,000. But with these people, you need to use weights in order to say that these 5,000 can replicate the behavior of the 50 million. And then you use these weights in order to say the probability that this household appear in the Spanish population is 10% or 2%, whatever, right? And the ones that are more agnostic are the A weights. With this one, you can use whatever. And then you can say, look, I run this regression, and I want to say that the effect that I'm finding for each bank depends on what? You open these brackets,
Or the X variables, no?
the assets, right?
Yes.
So it turns on the bank total assets. Let me see where are the bank total assets. Bank total assets are, this is the bank row, these are the bank total assets, okay? The logarithm of as a two space. And then this is the weight at the bank level. So if I run this operation in this way, I'll wait another time. Was here, no? I copy it from there. Because the plural, sorry. And then you see that here I'm saying that the size of the bank determines the weight that I assign to this bank. So suppose that you have 10 banks. One is a huge bank that has like 95% of the credit, and the other 9 banks are very small. The 9 represent 5% of the credit. Does it make sense that I run a regression using them equally weighted? No. What I have to do is to impose a weight that tells me, look, the weight that you need to the bank that is the largest has to be larger, and this is what we do here with the weights. This you are saying, use weights in the regression such that the largest bank has a larger weight. Proportional to what? Proportional on the size of the bank, for instance, the total assets. Here is the logarithm of the assets. Okay? Fine? Perfect. The other, the fixed effect, right? So the fixed effect that we use here would be that. But suppose that I want to use, I don't know, let me use this variable, no? The bank return on asset, the bank capital ratio, more controls. What else? At the firm level, let's say the benefits of the firm, the size of the firm, the effect, the liquidity of the firm, directly or with ratios, I don't care. I can use whatever you want at the firm level. Look, I'm introducing all these explanatory variables at the bank level and at the firm level. You see the one that I'm highlighting there. So what happens if I try to use this variable? Look, they are omitted. So you can try whatever you want, but with the fixed effects that you are using, the state is telling you, I'm omitting this variable because you are using the fixed effects. So I cannot estimate the value associated, the coefficient associated to this variable because you are using fixed effects at the front time level and the bank time level. Okay?
So taking away the effect of all the X variables.
You have all observed and unobserved characteristics implicit there. Why can I estimate this variable? Because this is defined at what level? Firm bank time level.
And the dependent variable is at the same.
The dependent variable doesn't matter. The dependent variable could be at any level because it's there. So the point is that, usually the dependent variable has to be at levels that are above the fixed effect that you are using, right? It doesn't make sense that you try to estimate the effect of this variable or the dependent variable if you define the dependent variable at the firm time level. So the dependent variable here is firm bank time level. Okay. But suppose that, for instance, I say I'm going to define a new fixed effect. The new fixed effect is firm bank time level, no? Which could be group, thief, entidad, year of the fire. No? This is a new fixed effect. If I repeat this regression with the firm bank time level, I don't have observations, right? Because I'm using the same fixed effects as the dependent variables. Okay? So it has to be above, because otherwise you cannot estimate. Okay. So I finished with a couple of things and then we go for the review. The other thing that I wanted to show is fixed effects, this is okay. The dependent variables. Look at the dependent variable here. How to resolve it. No? The dependent variable is this state, or the state. The dependent variable is this. Look, this is between -5 and 6, which is right an ample interval in the sense that this is the change in credit. Is between minus, let's say, 600 and plus 600. Why? Because it's the logarithm of the credit plus 1. Okay? Now you see the idea.
Yeah, is it percentage?
When you use the change in logarithm is equivalent to the percentages.
Okay.
So you know the approximation, no? The rule that. So if you take the logarithm of a number minus the logarithm of another number, in the limit is the same as taking the number minus the number relative to the number, one of the numbers. No? So it's just to obtain the changes in any variable. The difference is that is not gonna be between minus 100 and plus 100, because by default, when you are using the log changes, if you have zeros, it's gonna be a string, right? And suppose that is very extreme, and you wanna, what I said in the last session, no? How can I work with this variable? I can say, let's say winsort, this command winsort, the dependent variable, okay? And here, with the P, you define the level of winsorization that you wanna use. Let's say 2.5%, no? At the 2.5% level, which means that, you remember in the I think is the no, it's not here. So what you are saying is, I took the distribution. This is the distribution of the variable. Let's say this is the, let's say 2.5, and here you have the another 2.5%. What I'm saying is that I'm ignoring the values that are to the right of this number, and for any value that is here, suppose that this is x. For any value that is below here, I'm saying that this is x. And for any value that is above here, I'm saying that this is y. And you are visualizing in the sense that you are taking out the string values. And you will see what happens. In order to do that, you say winsort, you write the name of the variable and the 2.5%, that is the size of the winsorization that you are doing. And then you define a new variable, let's say credit with the down, winsorize. Look the difference. You see, this is with no winsorization, is between 5.85 and 6.3. And once I winsorize the variable, in some sense, I'm reducing the interval in the variable. And there would be like 2.5% of the observations that are at the minus 0.08, and 2.5% of the observations that are at this level. So artificially, I'm generating all these observations. So if I go to the data, you will see here that there are many observations that are truncated at this level. This is the percentile, right? There's 2.5. And there are many observations to which I assign this number. If you trim, instead of visualizing, what you are doing is to remove these observations directly, which is another possibility for trimming.
But how do we know if the winsorizing or the trim we make is appropriate?
Let's
Or
do it.
maybe we trim many data?
Let's do it. I don't use trim very frequently, but let me, the trimming,
So you technically, well, you would do both and see the,
exactly. Let me see the trimming. I can do the trimming manually. Okay, so the trimming would be the credit trimming would be equal to this credit winsorize, but we replace the credit trimming equal missing. So I use missing if the credit winsorize is lower than, let's say,
Okay.
this number. Okay? And then I do the trimming the other way. If the credit winsorize is larger, sorry. You know why? Because I was writing here minus minus. So if I didn't remember that I had this number of observations. You should be careful with that. I have this minus here, and I wrote the minus here as again here because I have copied the number. Minus is positive, and is would be like missing all the observations. Okay. So then I do it again, and I replace with missings all the observations, and with this below this number. And then it's just for fast observations. Okay. And then the same for the case in which it's above.
nice with right.
Okay? And then we have the same, almost the same number of observations. Your question is, how do I know if I'm doing the right thing or not? I mean, always, when you're asking about this, try all the specifications and see what happens, right? So this This is very simple. So this is the basic variable. And the coefficient is, this is with all the fixed effects. This is the specification, okay? With no clusters, I remember. This is 1.12, the value of the coefficient. Okay, so let's repeat the same, but using the credit Windsor rates. So the same dependent variable, but Windsor rates at the other level. So it's probably the same, right? You see? And if I use the trimming, it's a value. So in this case, doesn't matter. You can use whatever you want. If it gives very different effect, then you have to consider whether what you are doing is good or not, right? But that's the idea. When you Winsorize, I don't like trimming because with the trimming you are losing observations that are very important. But with the Winsorization, that is the one that I prefer, if you compare this coefficient 1.117 versus this one, which is 1.12, is roughly the same. So it's okay. The Winsorization that you are doing does not affect your result. So it's just that you are removing extreme values, but that's okay. If the values are very, 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 very extreme and you apply this, in some cases you get very significant. Important, you don't need to Winsorize only the dependent variable. You need to consider also the explanatory variables. And when it's firm characteristics, you need to Winsorize the explanatory variables as well. If not, you are going to get a lot of strange results. So when you, that's why in the papers the first thing is you solve the descriptive statistics, and you see the descriptive statistic, which is the minimum and the maximum. If the minimum and the maximum do not make sense, then consider whether the data is good or you just need to Winsorize those values. Then you Winsorize, and then the table is good. It's very common to Winsorize, because showing a table with extreme values casts a lot of doubts, because it affects not only the extreme values but also the mean or the standard deviation. You will have a standard deviation which is huge, and then you cannot estimate the coefficients properly. Okay? You need something that has a distribution that is, let's say, more or less standard. Okay, and I think with this command we are almost done. So I have another thing, but after the break. And then I show you the other stuff. Okay, questions?
So what we're doing instead of like the 0.5 to 1% and 99%, the mean and max just reduces. But the number of observations is still the same?
With the Windsor, yes, with the trimming.
Trimming cuts.
You see the difference, no? I mean, I do the descriptive statistics of the. Oops. This is the again, I'm going to the wrong. We compare this one. You see the number of observations when we use the trimming is much lower. The mean is a bit different because you are removing the streams, so it's going to be more concentrated. And you see that here the intervals are roughly the same. The only issue that I have here, I have a lot of observations in this number. And here I didn't use the trim, I used like an approximation for the trim. That's why the numbers don't coincide, but they are really similar. Okay. Break, 10 minutes, and then we continue a little bit. So you need to finish this. For those of you that didn't have breakfast. Amon.
No. Ya. Se come un kilo de brownie.
Con pizza todavía.
¿Lo ves? ¿Esto está claro? Más o menos.
Sí.
O sea, este comando es mágico, o sea, le da todo.
Para que como en econometría apenas tenemos método de los fixed effects. Por eso te pregunto cómo te lo
Pero es que en Clinical Banking, o sea, no es que yo me quiera meter en econometría. O sea,
Sí, obvio, tiene
econometría sabes mucho más que yo. Pero en Clinical Banking los fixed effects son claves para todo.
Claro, en toda etapa.
Los fixed effects para identificar las cosas, la oferta, la demanda, la petición, ¿no?
Sí, siempre.
Sí, puede por ejemplo, un truco es tiene regresiones a nivel empresa-tiempo.
Thanks for that.
No, my pleasure. A nivel empresa-tiempo. Ahí Lo normal es
Hackathon. El banco no allí como reto, pues no podría hacer
¿Es usar para dónde vas después? ¿Vas a estudiar? Sí. ¿Qué vas a estudiar? ¿Ah?
Para que sea más sostenible. Si no os gustan nuestros retos, escoged reto 11
Hoy hay cafetería abierta.
construcción. Por ejemplo, construcción
Yo tengo
es
una
el reto
hambre.
que eligió el equipo ganador de la final de
¿Quieren bajar? Me voy a comprar algo de tomar.
arquitectura que propusieron una alternativa al panel de yeso que se utiliza para construcción y han hecho los paneles de verde, o sea, cultivan materiales de construcción. ¿Vale? ¿Tiene alguna idea de lo que se por aquí? No creo que quede muy bien, ¿no? Bueno.
So what is happening during after the global financial crisis? You see that the yellow line, no, the deposits are below the blue line, the Euribor. After the crisis is the opposites, so which means that the deposits are above the Euribor, and in some sense this is a very special period, and this is kind of an irregularity, right? So what we do in the paper is the retail deposit cannot be above the market interest rate. I mean, it can be, right? But in some sense, it's a bit strange. And the other thing is that the spread between the lending rates and the market rates have widened. I mean, you see, in this period, the three of them move in the same way, and after this period, they don't move in the same way. So we cannot talk about equilibria in the second period, no? Because, and then we need a period in which the equilibria that we estimate really exist. So what we do is to use this sample to estimate the coefficients, right? And once you do this, you see, for instance, where is information from 2003 till 2007. We estimate the coefficients, and these coefficients tell you which should be the change in the loan rates depending on what is happening with the market rate. So when the ECB moves the policy rates, the market rate reacts immediately. That's why we use the market rate, because we have daily information. Okay? And then what we can see in this regression, once I estimate this is, look, I'm going to compare the coefficients that I estimate between, this is 2003, not 2023, this is a type, 2003 and 2007, and I see how the market rate, how the cost of the loans should have changed according to what we have seen in the past in an equilibrium model. And what you see in the blue bar is what I observe in the data, and what the model would tell me according to the equilibrium that I was using is what you can see in the red dots and the red intervals, right? And it tells you whether the transmission of monetary policy has been slower or faster than expected according to the equilibrium. That's the idea. So this is an application with this simple model. And then you see here, for instance, that this is the euro area, no? We can say that it refers to the tightening. It refers that, you know, that in December 2021, the Euribor started to increase, and the ECB moved the interest rates. It was in June 2022. The tightening period started in June 2022 until September 2023. So there was an increase of 450 basis points in the policy rate of the ECB, which is huge, right? And the point here is how this increase in the policy rates measured through the market rates, because they react immediately, is reflected in the cost of the loans for the households in the companies. Okay? And we use the market rate and January because the market rate usually reacts early. So when you see the Euribor, when you see whatever, they react in some sense to the later changes that the ECB, for instance, produced based on their decision. No? They increased 25 basis points the policy rate, the deposit facility rate, or they decreased 25 basis points. The market discounted, right? And when you see the market rates, they discount the changes that come later. So if you compare different maturities, you can see whether the market is expecting that the interest rates, the policy rates by the ECB increase or decrease. That's the idea. And then you can see whether it has been faster or not. So what happened here? Was it faster? Well, it depends on the segment. But look what happens with the deposits for households. The model was expecting the change that you see in the red dot, and the one observed was the one that you see in the blue bar. So much lower than the market was expecting. And here you see that, for instance, for France, was roughly the same. So it helps you to understand whether the monetary policy is being effectively transmitted or not through the interest rates. Okay? This is Spain. Was faster or slower? Slower, you see? I mean,
Slower.
for the case of loans for mortgages, it was much slower. The model was expecting it, and it was much slower. For the case of household deposits, it was also much slower. And with this, you can understand with this model whether monetary policy is being effectively transmitted or not. So if the monetary policy is effectively transmitted, it means that the decisions that they are taking to reduce inflation are effective. If not, you can say that it's not effective. Yeah.
There were many people saying that the inverse yield curve affected recession, or affects, or has a relationship with recessions, and during COVID, like after COVID, there was like a yield curve.
Yeah,
but there was no recession, and there were people saying that it was because of this. Like the deposits didn't change.
The
Deposits don't change. There's no like.
The slope in some sense depends between the difference of the long term and the short term. No? So if monetary policy is transmitted to the short term, depending on how it is transmitted, of course, it affects to the slope. This is one part. And then you have the forward guidance of the bank. The forward guidance is based on the credibility, and it determines how it's transmitted to the longer term. So the transmission of monetary policy, how effective it is for the short and the long, in some sense, defines the slope of the yield. Okay, that's true. But what do you think that explains this? That Europe was okay and Spain was slower. So it means that if you want to fight against inflation, if the monetary policy is not effectively transmitted, it means that
Fiscal policy.
is related to that, but easier. So it means that I need to increase the interest rates. For what? For reduced consumption, because households are not going to take credit, firms are not going to take credit, and then it means that in some sense it freezes the economy, and then the prices go down. Right?
So Spain is less sensible to the interest rate than other countries.
Exactly. In this example, the reason is why. You see Spain here, for instance, for the case of deposits, is in the right. And you can see here, for instance, for the case of house purchase, no? That there is also terminated. So what matters here is, if you use the euro area as a whole, which is what matters. I mean, when they take the decision, they don't take the decisions thinking especially in one country. They take the decision thinking in the euro area, right? So it can be effective at the euro area level, but there could be heterogeneity across countries. And then you see, for instance, for house purchase, you see the heterogeneity across countries, as Spain and France are below the euro area level, or you can see, for instance, in the case of term deposits. Right? So the
NFC is profit.
non-financial corporations. Okay, so the transmission could be effective at the euro area level, but not at the country level. And this is what we study here. And this is the last part. So here, in order to study the transmission of monetary policy, what we do is to use data of banks. This is not bank term, this is bank level data at the euro area level, and we compare the average monthly interest rates between September and December 2022 minus the same rates before the increase in the market rates. And then we see how banks increase the lending rates to households and to non-financial corporations after the tightening of monetary policy. Okay? I use the average because there could be seasonal effect, so taking 3 months and taking the average in some sense removes a bit of the seasonality. And then I take this difference and I regress this on the bank level variables, country level variables, for different types of mortgages and loans. And this is what happens. What explains this? Look, this is Spain was the, I don't remember now the colors. What is it? Bank level variable, this is Spain or the euro area? I don't remember. No, this is the euro area. This is the euro area because I didn't do that first. So this is the euro area. What explains that the transmission of monetary policy has been faster or slower? I use all the variables that I was saying in the previous slides, but I'm just showing here the ones that are significant. Look, for the case of the bank level variables, the blue dots and the blue bars refers to the mortgages, and the red ones refer to the deposits. Let's focus on the mortgages. What explains that the transmission of monetary policy has been lower than expected for the case of mortgages? The bank capital. The larger the capital, the lower is the transmission of monetary policy. And I'm going there later to the bank lending side. So, if banks have a lot of capital, what happens if I increase the market rate? It means that the cost at which they can finance themselves increases, so they have to pay more from the money they obtain in the market, but also more for the deposits. So it means that the banks are going to cut credit and I'm going to lend at higher rates. If the banks are very strong and they have a lot of capital and a lot of liquidity, the transmission of monetary policy can be slower than expected because they are so strong that the increase in the funding rates do not affect probably their funding because they have a lot of liquidity, right? And they don't need to increase the level for the household mortgages or for the non-financial corporations at the same level. So they don't want to lose clients. They say, look, I'm so strong that I can work with the smaller margins in the loans that I'm granting, and the transmission of monetary policy is less effective. If on the contrary, we are in a country in which banks are very weak, if the interest rate increases, the policy rates or the market rate, the Euribor, the banks are going to react much more and are going to cut credit much more. Right? So having good banks is positive in terms of financial stability, but in terms of monetary policy transmission could lead to a slower transmission than expected. So the decisions that are taken at the ECB level could be less effective if the banks are very strong. So that's why there is always a trade-off between monetary policy and financial stability. And that's why the two has to be considered jointly. So having good banks is good in terms of financial stability, but you see here, they don't react the same way. No? Perfect. The change in the deposit remuneration. This tells you the blue dot. You see that we don't have this dot for the deposit because it does not make sense to explain the dependent variable with the same variable. No? But for the mortgages, what happens with that? This is telling you that the banks that are transmitting more than expected the monetary policy are those for which the deposit rates are increasing more. So if I have to pay more for my deposits, then I'm going to transmit this huge increase to the household when they borrow. But what was happening in the case of Spain? In the case of Spain, these are the deposits, the transmission was very slow. So deposit rates didn't increase so much, right? Banks didn't pay much to the depositor. So then I don't need to increase the mortgage rates if I'm not paying more for the deposit. So people are still coming to deposit the money in my account at a very low rate. So if I don't have to pay more, I don't going to charge higher interest rates for the mortgages. Okay? That's the idea. And important, another thing that is very relevant for the mortgages, that is, we have the concentration and the change in credit versus deposits. So what happens with the deposits? Why was the transmission of monetary policy is lower than expected? Was not driven by bank variables. You see that the intervals are above and below zero, so it's not significant. But what matters for deposits? The concentration. And the change in credit versus deposits. So why monetary policy transmission was not effectively transmitted to deposits? If a market is very concentrated, I don't need to pay more to obtain deposits. How many banks do we have in Spain? How large they are? Right? So if you remember, during the European sovereign debt crisis, during the global financial crisis, in Spain there was something that was called the deposit war. Banks needed liquidity and they were paying up to 5-6% for the deposits. They were fighting in order to get clients. So in this period in which the market is very concentrated, there is no competition in banks offering deposits. So it's not that a given bank was offering 3% and the other were, no, they didn't move. There were many banks offering 0, 0.5. Given the concentration, it affects in some sense the transmission of monetary policy. Right? So this is very important. And the last thing that I wanted to say about this is the change in credit versus deposits. What does it mean? This is the ratio of the change in credit versus the change in deposit. So if the banks don't have lending opportunities, they are not going to pay for the deposits. Right? So if firms are not demanding credit, if firms don't want to invest, if I don't have potential clients to whom I can lend, look, I'm not going to pay you more for your deposits if I don't know what to do with the money. Okay? That's the story about the recent tightening of monetary policy. And something interesting here is that it depends a lot on the proportion of floating rate and fixed rate that the countries have. No? For instance, you see in this case, in Spain, as compared to the euro area, we have many loans, many mortgages that were at floating rates. Euribor plus something. In Europe was the opposite. They were at fixed rate. So when the interest rate increases or decreases and you have mortgages or loans at floating rates, it goes directly to the households and directly to the companies. If it's fixed rate, doesn't matter. If you increase or decrease the interest rate, the monetary policy is not transmitted in the same way. And this is another channel that I will explain later, that is the income channel. And the income channel says, for instance, here you can see Spain for the case of mortgages. This is the effect on the GDP, the gross disposable income. Sorry, it's not GDP, you see the GDI is the gross disposable income. This is the effect that the changes in household net interest rate have on the income of the households. So when you have a lot of households with floating rates, if the interest rate increases, it will diminish a lot the income of the household. And the monetary policy in that case is more effective through the income channel, right? In the sense that you have to pay more when I increase the interest rates. So you are going to consume more, less. So you decrease consumption and you want to freeze inflation. So there are a lot of households with floating rates and or a lot of mortgage companies with floating rates. You increase the rates, it affects directly to them. They cannot invest, they cannot consume, and in some sense, the pressure on prices increases. Okay, that's the idea. Perfect. And then let's go back to the regulation. I have another. If I have time, I will show you another thing that I have prepared for the second part that I don't have time of monetary policy. This is about the transmission of monetary policy and the role of banks in transmitting monetary policy. Question that I received regarding the regulations. So, how can I save the fixed effects? Okay, so the fixed effects can be saved. For instance, here in the fixed effects part, I have firm. I do this. You see what I have written here? Firm fixed effects equal. You see what I have introduced in the brackets in the fixed effects. If I write that effect and I run the regression again, you see what happens. Oh. This is the fixed effect that I obtain for each firm. You can save the fixed effects. So this is the average change of credit of each firm that I'm using in the regression based on the information that I have and on the characteristics. So you can save the fixed effects. Okay? More things. The idea of the cluster. I want you to be sure of this. So the idea of the cluster is when you run a response, the one that are very risky increases. So they can invest more as well. Okay? When the interest rate increases, it's the opposite. The expectation channel is mainly about the forward guidance, right? So it's not that channel as the other ones, it depends on the credibility of the central bank. So the point is that when the central bank communicates monetary policy, they say that I do this in order to maintain inflation at 2% for a prolonged period of time. So if you are credible, market is going to believe not just what you are saying in the short term, but also in the long term, right? So with the expectation channel, you affect the longer term. You say, look, I'm going to keep inflation at 2% for 10 years or for 5 years or whatever. So market thinks or expects what you are doing not just with the short term, but also with the long term. Perfect. And the final one is the bank lending channel. How does it work, the bank lending channel? As you can imagine. So if interest rate increases, then what happens? Anyway, this here. If interest rate increases, what happens with the cost of financing? 2 minutes. What happens with the cost of financing? It increases. What happens with the credit supply? It decreases. That is the idea of the bank lending channel. The point is that the bank lending channel depends a lot on what? On the strength of the banks. Remember the previous example. So if the banks are very strong, the transmission of monetary policy is going to be less effective. If the banks are weak and the interest rate increases,
So what is effective here? Okay?
the effect here is that when you increase the interest rates, the banks are going to pay more in order to obtain financing. So the lending that they offer is going to be more expensive.
Yeah, so that will reduce.
It reduces the demand of credit and credit supply and increases the price. And it reduces the output because the firms are going to invest less given that the credit is more expensive that they don't obtain credit. What I'm saying here is that it has several effects, no? Because you have the balancing channel. So when you increase interest rates, when you increase the discount here, the value of the collateral is going to be also lower, right? So I lend you, but before you were offering me this collateral, the housing, the value was, or the stock, suppose that they use stocks as collateral. The value was 100, and now the interest rate increase, the value of the collateral is lower, so I cannot lend you that. Right? So it affects also through the bank lending channel. So what I mean is that it reduces credit availability, it reduces investment, it reduces consumption, and so you freeze in some sense the economy and you freeze the inflation. And the last one is, well, this is the last one. The last thing that I wanted to say is, if banks are very strong, this channel is not effective.
Like in Spain.
Let's say this.
You cannot say yes, but
No, I mean, in Spain it was the case in the sense that it's tricky because Spanish banks, I think Germán explained this to you, no? The Spanish banks don't have more capital than European banks. The capital is low. The advantage is if when you run the stress test or whatever, they are well diversified, and the way in which the capital is obtained and the ways in which they have all the liquid assets make Spanish banks more resilient than European ones, or at least the same. So that's why I wanted to say yes and no. Yes, not just for Spain, also for the European banks. You know that since the global financial crisis, banks have more and more and more capital, no? So they are stronger. So that's why the transmission monetary policy is weaker. In the case of Spain, it was part of it was also the competition, but there is not much competition, and part of it was that firms were not investing. So if firms are not investing and I don't have lending opportunities, I'm not going to pay more to my deposit. Okay, that's it. So it depends a lot on how strong the banks are. Okay? Then I will this is related to the risk-taking channel. So what happens in some cases with the risk-taking channel is the opposite, is that the banks are very weak and they want to take more risk for what? For obtain more profits and to build capital. So sometimes monetary policy doesn't work because if banks are taking more risk than expected, then the transmission doesn't work because I was expecting that credit decreases, but if banks are crazy and they are taking a lot of risk, now that the interest rates are high, the mechanism doesn't work. Okay, but it depends on the bank's health and on the bank's risk taking. Okay? Then I send you this slide. There is not an exam of this part. The exam is going to be focused. For this part, you have to send me the homework. Right? If you want me to write answers for Germán, I can also do it. But I mean, what I want you is to understand how to do this, how to run a regression, how to.
Can you send us the codes, bro? Can you send us the codes?
Yeah, I can prepare I can clean the codes and I can send you some clean codes for you.
Perfect.
So then you have the next sessions in which you will have a homework, coding in Python or Stata, I don't know still where. And then you will have some data and you will need to write a proposal based on the results that you get from the quantile regressions analysis, the bar, the co-bar. For this part is the other homework, no? The one in which you do the research proposal, and then the exam is focused on Germán's exam. Okay? And that's all.
When is exam tomorrow?
So I guess that I don't know.
tomorrow morning.
No.
Sounds about right.
It has to be probably immediately before Easter, no?
Yeah.
I think so. So this is the last class, and for anything you need, you can send me an email to the personal or to the other email, the one or the word. I don't check the enough email, right? So if you send me an email there and I don't reply, it's just because of that.
Thank you so much, bro.
No, wish you the best with the exams, with the PhD, if you continue with the work. If any of you want to go to the Banco de España, just send me an email or we can. It's not that I know what to do, honestly, because I don't have the answers for the exam or anything, but
¿Qué? Sí, se me ha roto.
El otro día vi que
Oh, it's broken? Broken the glass? Can I have a look? No, can I have a look? What's going on?
You can repair it?
No, but
nada, luego os lo
well,
paso.
I mean,
Turn on the mobile.
yeah.
Sí,
I mean,
solo eso.
the best way to replace protector.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also, I had to change the mobile because, look, when I turn on the mobile,
Ah,
yes,
yeah.
yes. The
When
screen is
did it
completely
happen? When did it happen?
Like 1 week ago in the gym.
What? Let's say
1 week ago in the
1
gym.
week ago. Okay. I mean, like.
I was lifting and the weights dropped down
Ah, it's
in
just-
the mobile jobs.
Oh yeah, that's sad.
It's impossible. I think that repair the screen is costly than buy a new mobile.
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, it's so hard to use because it's the black light here.
Yeah.
Right?
You know, the screen is
Pero cuando se
divide.
dan cuenta de
Yes, it's becoming too display.
No, incluso la casa, o sea, si no es lo mismo una casa en Madrid, ¿no? Porque nosotros es una casa en un pueblo de 50.
¿Será así que compres casas en todos esos lugares y vayas a probar un campo?
Pero tienen en cuenta el valor futuro.
Sí, sí, claro.
Porque, ¿sabes? Es el valor de mercado, no es lo mismo, no te valoran igual, no te ten en cuenta que el valor de colateral al final viene por lo hace una tasadora. Las tasadoras están muy relacionadas con los bancos muchas veces. O sea, cuando tú compras una casa,
Tiene que ser una lista de
Pero el valor de
bancos.
tu casa, si sube el tipo de interés, el valor de tu casa
El
¿no?
si subes tipo de interés, o sea, bueno, vas a pagar más por la hipoteca, va a caer la demanda.
Pero digo, si tú el valor, si tú tu casa lo pones como un colateral para otro loan, si sube el tipo de interés, tiene más valor.
O sea, si subes el tipo de interés, ¿no? para las hipotecas, va a haber menos demanda de...
Eso sí, pero como colateral, hipoteca como colateral.
A ver, como colateral, la historia es que depende de, por ejemplo, yo qué sé, el alquiler, ¿no? O sea, si la renta viene del alquiler y tú lo descuentas así, si sube el tipo de interés, vas a descontar los pagos futuros que tú tienes de alquiler con mayor tipo de interés, luego el valor va a ser menor.
No sé, menor.
¿Sabes? O sea, piensa la casa como si fuera una empresa. ¿Cuál es el pago que te ofrece a ti la casa?
Claro, con flujos futuros. Y si tú lo que haces es, cuando tú haces una proyección de los flujos futuros y lo descuentas con el interest rate, si sube, se te achica el
O sea, si estás descontando los pagos del alquiler como un propietario que puedes obtener, por menor, hasta luego, muchas gracias.
Justo.
Igual. ¿Sabes? Lo estás descontando con mayores tipos de interés.
Vale.
¿Sabes? Entonces, por ejemplo, la parte de la casa, digamos que no la alquila, pero tiene coste de uso. El coste de uso es, cuando tú compras una casa, lo que tú estás perdiendo por usar la casa. Entonces, si el tipo de interés sube, quiere decir que por tener esa casa, tú podrías estar invirtiendo en un depósito. Claro, estaría pagando más. ¿Sabes? O sea, piensa todo como en términos de descuentos.
Sí.
¿Vale? Y luego subo todas las slides de esta parte, cualquier cosa. Me siento ver esto último tan rápido. Esto lo lleváis, ¿eh? Lo tomáis.
Oye, ¿nos quedamos en esta por subir las persianas y...
¿La subo?
Vale, o sea,
Otra bola.
Seguimos un momento fuera.
No estoy seguro que... Pero digo,
Ya.
igual
Nada,
los
chicos,
segundos que entran bastante largos.
Cuidad mucho y
Gracias.
cualquier cosa me escribís, ¿vale? Me vais
muchas
escribiendo
gracias a ti.
Fenomenal.
lo que necesitéis y lo que os pueda ayudar. Yo ya digo que sé lo que sé de eso, que me dices de no sé ni cómo hacen el examen, ni
Vamos viendo a ver si nos merece la pena.
Sí, sí, yo también lo he...
Es que me explica mucho.
No, a ver, o sea,
qué es lo que haces como técnico, o sea, ¿qué anda?
no, es que depende de dónde caigas.
Claro.
O sea, te asignan según un poco tu currículum.
Sí, sí. A ver, a vosotros, o sea, si vais desde aquí, desde un máster de Economía y Finanzas, lo lógico es que os lleven a la parte de Economía.
Ya.
Bueno,
¿Vale?
¿Y está guay o qué tipos de trabajos son?
es que no sé.
Para el técnico, a ver, o sea, te digo la verdad.
Sí, sí.
O sea,
Sí, sí. Siempre probarte, ¿no?
hay una parte grande de trabajo manual, o sea, de trabajo hacer gráficos. O sea, ahora mismo, el gobernador que tenemos, pues es un tío que le da mucha importancia, por ejemplo, al formato de la presentación. O sea, ya no tanto al contenido, que también, pero pues el color, la escala a la izquierda, la escala a la derecha, si esto se ve bien, entonces claro, ¿qué pasa? Pues que el técnico, entre comillas, es el que tiene que ayudar a preparar estas cosas, pues pierde mucho tiempo
Ya.
con los formatos. He pensado que en vez del azul me gusta más el azul oscuro y te cambian todos los formatos de todo, es daltónico. Entonces, no, vale, esto gráfico tiene que ser para que lo pueda ver accesible. Como cambiar, entonces, claro, ahora están un poco los chavales quemados por esto, porque bueno, o sea,
Ya.
entonces, depende mucho donde caigas. Si caes en una zona en la que, por ejemplo, donde llevan la cuesta financiera de las familias, ¿qué hacen ahí? Pues ahí a veces se encargan de hacer las encuestas por teléfono o recogerle, que es un rollo.
Ya.
Pero luego hay otras partes donde entra un técnico y se dedica a hacer las previsiones de la economía española.
Claro, ahí se aprende.
Hombre, eso está guay.
Claro, está guay. Pero digo, que es que
Bueno, la suerte.
que no es, o sea, a ver, mi consejo es, imagínate que quieres hacer eso, te aplicas, te pasas, que te hacen una entrevista, pues ahí claramente donde yo quiero ir.
Claro, bueno,
A mí lo que me interesa es esto. Si hay 5 personas que dicen lo mismo, pues ya veremos.
A ver, podemos también, o sea, en el hipotético caso de que pasemos entrevista y nos ofrezcan un trabajo, escribirte a ti y preguntarte, vale, me han ofrecido en este departamento, ¿qué sabes de este?
Siempre.
Y me dices, pues vale, este departamento efectivamente no, sí.
Puedo decir un poco en plan,
No,
o te record,
no,
o sea, no, es que no vayas a la entrevista y es que me ha dicho
No,
este
no,
que está
no,
bien.
no. Pero vamos a ver, ¿qué me dices de ese departamento?
¿Qué pasa? O sea, ¿qué pasa?
Porque también te digo,
Ya.
dudo que la entrevista me diga, no, vas a estar haciendo gráficos un año entero.
No, hombre, vale, vale.
Claro, entonces eso no lo puedo saber.
No, pero lo que te quiero decir es que si haces eso, o sea, y tú me dices a mí, yo te digo, oye, pues mira, me he enterado de que la persona que estaba aquí o las personas que están aquí están haciendo eso. Que eso te lo guardes tú. Bueno, pues sabes, porque cuando lo preguntes, ya, o sea, tú lo tienes claro, pero hay gente que luego llega y es que Sergio me ha dicho que y yo, joder, ¿sabes? ¿Entiendes?
Vale.
Entonces sí, o sea, yo me puedo enterar de qué se hace y yo te digo, pues mira, de lo que están buscando, el que más te interesa es este. ¿Sabes? Y hablar yo con la persona y decir, oye, hay un chico que viene de aquí, que, ¿sabes? Eso sí.
Un poco las personas.
Vale, pero luego
Bueno, pues ya eso dependerá mucho de si avanzamos o no.
Claro, no, pero, y que luego depende aquí y que no caiga un shock y te hagan una petición de otra cosa y lo que yo te he dicho quede en la, ¿sabes?
Sí, sí.
O sea, que es que el problema, ya te digo, o sea, el Lonja es un sitio que está muy bien en el largo plazo, pero que en el corto plazo, cuando empiezas a compararte con lo que hace el de al lado, pues hemos entrado, o sea, si estamos en el mismo sitio, hemos entrado por el mismo, ¿cómo puede ser que yo esté haciendo esto?
Ya.
Pues si empiezas así, te quemas.
Claro.
Te quemas. ¿Sabes? O sea, tiene que ser pensar a largo plazo, pues mira, es un sitio donde puedo crecer, vas avanzando con los años, tienes un montón de facilidades, te dan un montón de ayudas para la hipoteca, tienes residencias para irte de vacaciones. Pero claro, en el corto plazo cuenta la antigüedad. Entonces, yo la primera vez que fui a la residencia que tenemos en Roda de Vara, que es una residencia increíble a la playa, o sea, te vas toda la familia, para que te das una idea, son 600 euros, no digas esto en voz alta porque ya los periódicos nos machacaron con eso, ¿no? O sea, cuando salió el anterior gobernador, Pablo, como daba un poco de caña al gobierno, salía La Sexta,
Sí.
aquí una residencia en tal, mira cómo viven los empleados y sacan... No, o sea, eso, pues cuando vas acumulando años, vas acumulando puntos, joder, irte 15 días allí, ¿sabes? A un sitio, pensión completa, con
Sí.
todo esto. Entonces, claro, te pongo un ejemplo de cosas que ahora no las veo. Lo que es el fondo de pensiones. Si tú das un 1,5% de tu salario, un 1%, no sé cuánto es, como aportación al fondo de pensiones, el Banco de España mete otro 7% en un fondo de pensiones. Entonces eso no está, ¿sabes? O sea, que hay un montón de cosas que están muy bien, pero claro, tiene que ser con paciencia y decir siempre voy a demostrar lo que valgo y lo que hago, y cuando la gente lo vea, pues ya confiar. O sea, que no entres y digas, y es que quiero hacer forecast o quiero hacer, porque no te va a ir bien. O sea, te vas a agobiar, te vas a quemar, hay que ir muy tranquilo, con mucha humildad y poquito a poco. Entonces, si vas así, pues mira, igual me paso 6 meses haciendo gráficos, ¿vale? Pero si yo demuestro que esto lo hago bien, soy una persona seria que trabajo, la gente va a ir confiando un poco más. O sea, depende un poco de ti, ¿sabes? Entonces hay técnicos que han entrado como técnicos y luego se han sacado oposiciones de economista titulado, siendo técnicos.
Pero
así.
Las oposiciones son muy largas, ¿sí? El temario.
Es que no lo sé.
Idea.
No sé. Pues yo no entré por esa vía, entonces no sé decir.
Claro.
Y, o sea, si entramos de técnico un año, después la idea es que te puedas seguir en el banco, ¿no? O depende de la suerte que tú tengas.
Si entras de técnico temporal, antes era entrar de técnico temporal, lo que te garantiza más o menos es que si te gusta el sitio, cuando sigues, si pasas la oposición, sigues vinculado a lo mismo, eso sí.
Vale.
Ahora, si entras de técnico temporal, pues ya tienes más o menos una idea de cómo es el examen. El examen que te pedirán de permanente será más o menos parecido. La diferencia es que, lo que les decía el otro día, si lo apruebas, pasas a Alcencia a hacer un máster en un año, en el que pasan los, por ejemplo, te estoy hablando del último caso, ¿no? Conozco gente que trabaja conmigo y que ha ido ahí. Pasan 50 y de esos 50 solo entran 25.
Vale.
Algo de 25 se quedan fuera.
Vale.
¿Sabes?
¿Ese año en Cenfi ¿te pagan o no te pagan?
Es gratis. Es gratis y te pagan también. O sea, para ti es gratis el máster y también te pagan una beca por hacer el máster, que es más o menos, pues, no sé cuánto es, o sea, que
para
no,
vivir,
que no.
Pero el
Para
máster
vivir.
El máster es parecido a este, yo diría.
o sea, volver a hacer el MIF.
Volver a hacer el MEC, más o menos.
Vale, joder.
Más o menos.
Vale.
Entonces, lo único que muchas clases las dan gente del banco,
Qué guay.
asociadas a las cosas del banco. O sea, te digo, depende. O sea, yo quise, o sea, a mí me ofrecieron dar clase y digo, no doy clase aquí porque, o sea, no por nada, sino porque dan 30 horas, ¿sabes? 30 horas a gente con la que luego, ¿sabes? Si es incómodo, le pones suspenden por tu culpa o lo que sea, quedan, ¿sabes? Una cosa es dar una clase en un máster que la gente va por aprender, otra cosa es dar un máster que está eliminando gente.
Es como que te sientes responsable.
Y yo sinceramente no quise
es que...
porque, ¿sabes? O sea, conozco gente que había entrado y gente que había estado trabajando conmigo y ahí, imagínate que esta persona no pasa porque, y yo no, o sea, no, es que no hay conflicto de interés, o sea, yo no, ¿sabes? Entonces, pero mucha gente del banco sí que da clase ahí, entonces es como, pues, dar clase de cosas que luego vas a usar.
Claro.
Econometría, pues la econometría que vas a usar para hacer forecast.
Claro, más específico.
Más específico.
Ya.
O sea, es como esto, pero
más
más aplicado a lo que vas a hacer luego después.
Falta preparado.
¿Sabes? Pero hay una parte micro, econometría y todo esto estadística que es parecida.
Ya.
¿Sabes? Entonces,
Bueno, qué guay.
depende. Bueno, ya digo, lo que necesitéis, o sea, yo, o sea, por intentar, yo lo intentaría. O sea,
Sí, que tampoco pierdes nada.
no pierdes nada. Ves cómo es el examen, te haces una idea y luego te quieres presentar al otro. Pues mira, aquí me preguntó, pues ya sabes lo que te tienes que estudiar. Yo sé que hay mucha gente que va a academia.
Madre mía. O sea, que son preguntas...
Es una oposición al
De
final.
posiciones, claro.
Pero lo de técnico...
O sea, lo de técnico temporal, no, pero hay mucha gente que ya se prepara la oposición de técnico porque la van a sacar dentro de no sé cuánto.
Y van a temporada.
Y empiezan ya a estudiar, pues van a ver el examen y ya están en la academia, ¿sabes?
Sí.
O sea, depende un poco de eso. Entonces, ya te digo, esa es una opción, la de técnico. Es la otra opción de decir, oye, me apunto. Sorry, I was speaking Spanish. Do you
It's
understand
totally fine.
Do you understand Spanish or?
No.
Okay, sorry. So we're talking about working at Banco de España.
Working on a bank de España.
Exacto.
Sí.
Exacto. So,
Soy investigador también,
the other thing is that, I mean, you can prepare, let's say, a PhD, and after the PhD, you can work a few years, and then you can enter through a different path, which is better, but more difficult, more competition. So, I mean, it depends. So, I know people, for instance, a person that was working with me that is from a small village of Spain, and their parents were working she told me, look, I don't want that my parents continue paying me this, right? Because they don't have much money, so I need to get something immediately. So in the case of this person, I fully understand that she needs this now, and she went directly to that because she cannot spend 5 years more student because parents couldn't pay that. So in that case, I understand that this is the solution. If you tell me, look, this is not the case, I can't study. I mean, you are very young. So you have how many years? 50 years, 40 years working. If this continues like that, I don't know. I mean, think about that. No? In the sense that, I mean, you see it like with some anxiety, no, in the sense that I need to work, I want to work. I agree. But it's like a tower. I mean, if you wanna build the tower quickly and you don't have like good cimientos, I don't know how to say that in English, the tower cannot be very tall, right? Because if you don't go down and you have a good structure, the tower will fall down. And you have to think about it. So if you invest and you pay a lot of time in order to have a very solid structure, probably the tower goes up slowly, but it's gonna be tall. So you have to think about this. So I understand what you say. I think that this is very nice, but this is a very personal decision. What is the optimal? I don't know. But you need to. I mean, it costs zero to you. Apply to this. It costs zero. If you pass the exam, you come out there 1 year. You see the experience. I like it. I don't like it. That's 1 year of your life. It's something that is doable. Makes sense to me, right? So, but if you say, look, I don't want to do it so quickly, I want to continue studying, or I prefer to go to, there are many people that have a good career working in a private company and then they go back to the banco, so there are many paths. So, I mean, if you need advice or you need to talk to me, I'm very happy, but probably I don't give you the answer that you...
Yeah.
But this is one answer. My point is that you need you need more people to ask, and with all the probably I'm an observation to Wilsonize, right? And don't consider me, but you need to ask too many people.
Yes.
But consider that. I mean, how quickly did you go there, and the other things.
Gracias.
Vale. Pues nada, Sergio.
Mucho gusto. Cuidaos mucho y que vaya muy bien.
Gracias.
Vale,
Thank you.
Adiós.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Daniel, are you asking him for like to applying a job in a bank or sort of it in Spanish previous?
Yeah, he was talking about how to join Banco de España.
Yeah. Because that
Because you can join directly,
directly.
applying,
Yeah.
and then you have to other ways to make a PhD.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then
Yeah. After that, I understand. Because I saw his.
But I don't know if for working in the Bank of Spain you need to be national. I don't know. A resident. I mean, a citizen.
Yeah.
I really don't know.
Yeah. Because I saw his CV. It's like he's getting a PhD, and after that he's doing the AP, the assistant professor here at the beginning in our major, and secondly become like a higher to be a real professor, then join the bank of Spanish, and maybe at the beginning it's just title is not so high, and like now he's a division of the head, or right?
Yeah. I mean, that's the basic that he was talking, that you can join directly with a good master or with a PhD, and the other option is to pass an exam that you have to prepare.
Yeah.
A typical exam with 200 topics.
Yeah, I mean that's hard, and
Yeah, it's like 1 year or 2 years in your at home studying for that exam. Then you pass that exam. It's not passing the exam doesn't mean that you have joined into the Bank of Spain.
Just the basic requirements.
You pass that exam, then you have to take another master specifically for the Bank of Spain, and then you have to get, then they make a distribution of your grade, and if you are in the best percentile, then you can join into the bank. I mean, it's a long option.
Yeah, that's
It's
hard.
very
I
lot
mean,
of
yeah.
time, but then you are like a funcionario, ¿cómo se dice?
Working for the government.
Yeah, but then you work for the government.
Yeah.
You have
Cambiamos de aula, ¿no?
Sounds like it's a very long story.
yeah.
It's a long story.
Ya que era aula.
But Bank of Spain is so great. I mean,
Yeah.
they pay.
They
so
pay very high.
Yeah,
It's like how is the salary like him to?
him like him.
Yeah. I don't know.
He's the director, no? Of the
Director
of the department.
he must
Maybe 10,000 per month.
10,000 per month.
But people
Bless
like,
you.
but junior people maybe
This is for
2,000.
Yeah. Thanks.
But
Adios.
where are you going?
and just outside.
Okay, so wait for me.
Okay.
No, Chile is looking for
But you-
o sea, espera aquí, pues.
Yeah. I mean,
Junior
yeah.
people like between 2 or 3,000.